Chapter 7. At the prospect of action, fatigue dropped from the three-man posse like a discarded slicker. Cinches were quickly tightened. Tallying Pat's sorrel, they dropped down the slope. For 30 minutes the three nursed every ounce of speed from their tired ponies, working through the hills on a course calculated to intercept the two riders heading for Dutch Springs. Unexpectedly, the hard-riding horsemen flushed their quarry at the mouth of a brushed ravine. Crashing down through the undergrowth, they emerged into a narrow grassy valley, down the center of which two riders were ambling leisurely. "Looky!" gasped Sam in quick surprise. "One on the near side's a woman, riding side saddle." Reining down to a trot, the three fanned out and cut across towards the suspects. The woman stared straight ahead. Beyond her, the man raised an arm in careless salutation and seemed in no wise perturbed. "It looks like Glencourt and his lady friend," murmured Pat. "Looks like we hit a blind trail." The assistant paymaster reined up at their approach. His eyes ran over their dust-powdered garb and the sweating ponies. "Greetin', Sheriff," he hailed cheerfully. "You fellers seem a little shop-worn, so to speak. Returning from an arduous manhunt, I presume?" "Another payroll was lifted," returned the sheriff, reining up ahead of the pair. He watched Glencourt's pasty features closely. Quick surprise registered on the young fellow's face. His jaw dropped in astonishment. Then his wide mouth quirked in a grin. "Saved my bacon, by Jove! Bill North threatened to flay me alive if I didn't turn up this morning to help dole out the cash. But there's no dollars to be dollin'." He chuckled gleefully. His expression changed at a sudden thought. They didn't kill Bill, did they?" Doubt clouded Pat's gray eyes as he watched Glencourt lolling easily in the big saddle-stock. Either the dispassionate young Easterner was an ace actor, or he was as innocent in complacency in the hold-up. "Weren't you in town last night?" queried the sheriff. The girl spoke for the first time. Her voice was sharp. "Don't answer any of his questions, Jeff. It's none of his damn business." Pat's gaze flickered into her direction. Blondie had been beautiful, once, before the excesses of dance-hall life had marred her. Devoid of makeup, her features were well molded. A thick mane of hair, as yellow as the sun-dried bunch grass, hung in a long braid down her back. A tight button blouse confined her generous curves, but the revealing sunlight was unkind to Blondie. As the sheriff's searching gaze dwelt upon the flesh sagging beneath her chin, the faint wrinkles etched around her eyes and the traces of gray at the roots of her hair, he was reminded of a rose, full-blown and fading fast. "Blondie's right, Sheriff," rejoined Glencourt a trifle uncertainly. It really is none of your business." "I asked if you were in town last night," reiterated the sheriff emphatically. Glencourt fidgeted uneasily in his saddle and glanced appealingly at the girl's frigid features. "It's a beastly embarrassing question," he evaded. Long hours on the trail had rasped the sheriff's temper. From neck to buttock his skin itched and burned from the powdered alkali dust, and his throat felt as though it was lined with cinders, and his eyes were reddened from the sun's glare. "See here, mister," his voice was flinty. "The pay train was wrecked last night, and 2 fellers were killed and 3 mashed up. If you had been in town, you'd know it. If you're out here of town, you're a suspect, and that spells jail." "Oh, fiddlesticks," burst out the young man defensively. "I was miles away. I spent the night at the Circle L ranch house." And then, conscious of the implications of his admission, He cleared his throat apologetically and stared studiously at his pony's ears. "You got a witness, too," commented the sheriff ironically. Blondie sniffed. Pat rasped his chin and eyed the discomforted Glencourt. "I reckon we'll just take you two in," he decided finally.
"You can't get away with it, you hick sheriff!"
shrilled the girl, pale cheeks reddened with anger.
"I got friends. You can't pick on us. We never did nothing, and you know it. You haven't got the savvy to catch a cold, so you railroad the first person you meet. We was never near Coyote."
She checked abruptly with quick, indrawn breath. Brittle silence enveloped the group. "Did I say the wreck was in Coyote Cut?" inquired the sheriff gently. Lips tight-pressed and bosoms raising, fallen beneath the tight-fitting blouse, with repressed emotion, the girl sat emotionless.
"I heard the crash," she admitted sulkily.
"And guessed it was a hold-up, so you walked outside with a stable lantern for a look-see." Derisive rode the sheriff's tones. He kneed his pony and wheeled beside Glencourt. "I reckon we'll hit for town." He turned his head. "You tail us with the gal," he shouted to his partners, "and drop back a ways." By the time the cavalcade reached the scattered tents that mushroomed around the fringes of town, the sheriff had wormed Glencourt's story out of him, or the story he chose to tell. It was so simple and sordid, and so plainly reflective of the weak-willed assistant paid master's character, that it sounded like the truth. Glencourt claimed to have obtained permission from June Larson to use the Circle L until the construction camp moved on. He maintained it as a nest of which he entertained his lady friend. The previous afternoon they had hired ponies at the livery barn and rode out. They had seen no one. He had not the slightest inkling that anything untoward was occurring, and had escorted his lady friend homeward when he met the posse.
"Blondie's a good girl at heart," explained Glencourt. "She's just the victim of unfortunate circumstances. She detests that dance hall crowd. So I leased the ranch so we could get away from it all together."
Touching, thought Pat, and quite plausible. If Blondie hadn't let the cat out of the bag. Just how much did Glencourt really know of the hold-up? Had the girl hogs-wiled him? Or he was really either just a jackass or a danged clever coyote? From the corner of his eye, the sheriff saw one of the loungers, hunkering in the shade of the Bucket of Blood's high plank front, jerked hastily to his feet and scuttled through the entrance of the saloon at the dusty knot of riders that were jogging down Main Street. So, Leroux had a lookout posted, pondered Pat. More proof that he was linked up with the hold-up. Sam and Ezra walked the ponies back to the livery barn while Pat escorted his two suspects to the little lean-to office. Jake Pierce was set solidly in a straight-backed chair and chewing a cigar. His gaze lingered upon Blondie, but he made no comment as Pat herded the pair before them. "You watch that lady, Jake," admonished Pat, sliding open a desk drawer and picking up a ring of keys. "I gotta make this gent comfortable."
"I say,"
protested Glencourt as the sheriff steered him outside and flung open the jail door.
You can't do this. I know nothing of that beastly hold-up. I demand a lawyer immediately."
"You ain't arrested yet," drawled Pat. "Just protective custody. I'll spring you in about 30 minutes, maybe." With this sparse consolation, he pushed the bewildered young man into the cell and clanged the door shut. The air in the small office was blue with cigar smoke and stifling from the sun rays that beat upon the tin roof. Pat set the door ajar and plunked down in the swivel chair. Blondie sat as far away from Pierce as possible, tight-lipped and stiff-backed.
Kinda looks like you caught yourself a canary," commented Pierce pleasantly. "Yeah, and she's gonna sing if she craves to keep out of the cage," returned Pat shortly. Briefly, he told the Pinkerton man of the signal light that flashed from the vicinity of the Circle L to warn the wreckers that the pay train was going through, of the couple's overnight trip to the ranch, and the girl's involuntary admission that she knew of the holdup. "There's no way that she could have heard about that wreck," he summed up. "I'm staking my star that she was in cahoots with the wreckers and lit that lantern." He eyed Blondie's pale features, now taut with attention. "You come clean, and we'll ease you out of this tight spot. If not," he paused significantly. "You dumb flat feet would arrest a person to make a showing," flashed the girl. "You dribble plenty of words, but they mean nothing to me. Jeff will confirm we never left the ranch." "You knew the train was wrecked," accused the sheriff. "I heard it crash, if that's what you mean." "And guessed it was the pay train?" said Pat. "That's just it. Now make something out of it," she rejoined tartly. The sheriff sighed. He hated to be tough on a woman. Abruptly, he changed his line of attack. "Nice little holdout you and Glencourt got a hold of," he commented. "We like it." "How come you got the notion to ride out yesterday?"
"Jeff wanted to get away from town."
"North wanted him to stick around because he was needed bad on payday." Blondie shrugged indifferently. "And Glencourt says you were dead set on riding out for the Circle L." The door moved slightly, but no breeze stirred the heat-burdened air. The girl tossed her head.
"Maybe it was my idea, so what?"
"Plenty," returned Pat grimly. Silently, he gathered his long legs beneath his chair. Without warning, he leapt headlong for the door. It flew open with the impact of his shoulder, and he caught a glimpse of a fast-moving leg vanish around the corner of the shack and plunged after it. A wagon, its team tied to a wheel, had drawn up beside the courthouse. The pursuing sheriff caught a fleeting glimpse of the eavesdropper as he dodged behind the wagon. Before Pat could round the vehicle, his quarry was mingled with the stream of moving men that were back and forth over the plank walk. Breathing heavily, the sheriff returned to the office and slammed the door shut behind him. "Missed the coyote," he grunted to Pierce. "Who rods the hold-up gang? Leroux?" He swung around towards the silent Blondie, firing the question as he turned.
"You should know you're a sheriff," returned the girl coolly.
Jake Pierce, previously a silent spectator, cut in. "Let me ask a few questions, Pat. You see, I know Blondie." The girl's head jerked in his direction.
"Plenty know me. I'm real popular around here."
Pierce eyed the smoke curl slowly from the tip of his cigar. "Well," he murmured, "this was way back. You used to go under the name of Kitty Newton in those days. Feller by the name of William Bardsley lived in Kansas City. Got tangled up with you. Poisoned his wife and swung for it. And you skipped out."
"That's a lie. You're crazy."
Blondie's eyes distended and the blood drained from her pale face. "Maybe I am, but I knew I'd seen your face somewhere. It was on a reward dodger. There's a warrant out for Kitty Newton. I recollect the description said she carried a purple birthmark on the back of her neck." His voice hardened, his eyes probing the tense-faced Blondie. "Could be that's why you wear your hair down. Perhaps I should take a look at your neck." He rose ponderously and crossed the room towards her. Blondie threw up her hands in sudden terror, striving to ward him off. No, no! She shrieked. Her gaudy self-assurance was gone, swept away by a storm of tears. Pierce returned to his seat. The two men eyed her silently as she slumped in her chair, her body shaken by unrestrained sobbing. It's a hell of a business, thought Pat. But the lure of payroll gold had killed 3 men, and it looked like this dance-hell jade held the secret to the killings. Blondie gradually regained self-control and her sobbing quieted. Pierce spoke again, his voice cold and emotionless. Come clean and we'll forget Kitty Newton. If not, well, I reckon we'll send you down for 10 years on that poison count. All right, Flatfoot, you win. Blondie's voice was as dead as her reddened eyes. Sure, I was the lookout. Jeff was dead drunk in the shack. A shadow darkened the unwashed window behind the sheriff. The girl shrank back in quick terror, and Pat whirled as a gun roared almost in his ear and glass shattered. Blondie pitched forward. Both men plunged for the door. It was secured on the outside. They flung their bodies against it. The stout timbers creaked, but would not yield. Pat snatched out his gun and turned to the smashed window, knocked out the remaining glass. Pierce hoisted him through, head foremost, and he hit the ground on all fours and scrambled to his feet, gun in hand, searching for the assassin. Nothing moved. On the flat ground outside the courthouse, the killer had made his getaway. Slapping his .45 back into leather, the chagrined sheriff turned to examine the door. The handle had been securely roped to a hasp, driven in at some time in the past for a padlock. He sawed through the rope with his Barlow knife, and Jake Pierce stepped out, the cigar butt still clenched in his teeth. The detective grinned humorously. Outguessed us. Pat moved past him and bent over the girl's crumpled form. Dead before she hit the floor, grunted Jake. 2 more minutes and we would have had the goods on the row, said Pat. I'm going to go brace the bastard. Boiling inward, he headed for the bucket of blood. There was no sign of the hatchet-faced man on the floor of the saloon. At the far end of the bar, a door gave admittance to a small room he used as a small office. Without ceremony, Pat kicked open the door and walked in. LaRoe was seated at a table at the center of the room. Behind him, a safe bulked against the wall. Lithographs of racehorses decorated the plank walls. A closet was built into one corner, and there was no other furnishings save 2 straight-back chairs. The saloon man's head jerked up when Pat barged in. From long habit, the stock smile masked his features, but the sheriff read veiled caution in Azuda's eyes. Nothing wrong, I hope, Sheriff? LaRoe's high-pitched voice was almost a whine. Plenty, snapped Pat. Blondie spilled her guts. LaRoe flicked open the lid of a cigar box on the table before him and fumbled for his smoke. The diamonds set on his finger rings danced and sparkled. Scared, thought the sheriff. Blondie? The saloon man's voice was puzzled. Oh, one of my girls. He spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. What can I do about that? That Blondie, she lies like a greaser. Not about the wreck in Coyote Cut. Blondie mixed up in that affair. LaRoe's voice reflected, incredulous. She's not the only one. She put the finger on you, LaRoe. The saloon man jumped to his feet, his chair crashing backwards. The set smile was wiped off his face, his eyes sparkled with anger. Thin lips were drawn tight against his teeth. What do you mean? He choked. What could have I done with a train wreck? That blonde's foozel's word ain't worth a damn. He padded towards the door. Where is that hellcat? I'll make her eat her words. You cut the play acting, drawled Pat. She won't talk any more, and you know it.
She'll be talking plenty, raged LaRoe, when I kick her out into the streets.
For the first time, doubt stirred in the sheriff's mind. Either LaRoe was a staged acting master, or he was innocent. Blondie could have been working with another gang. Anyway, his bluff hadn't worked, and he hadn't a shred of proof to back up his suspicions. He rose and shouldered indifferently past the saloon keeper and moved outside, carefully pulling the door shut behind him. The door closed. He froze, hand still on the knob. Then he flung it open again and thrust his head inside. LaRoe stood frowning at the wall. In a flash, the frown was replaced by the stock smile.
Did you forget something? He inquired smoothly, eyes mocking the poker-faced Pat.
Yeah. Send Blondie a wreath. At least you owe her that. With this, he closed the door and turned away. There was the smallest doubt in his mind regarding LaRoe's guilt. If only he had some proof, and the proof was locked behind Blondie's lifeless lips. Glittering with sequins, the white arms bare and black dress cut low, Maggie Maloney sailed across the saloon, her bold eyes smiling a greeting. The sheriff was in no mood for Maggie's pleasantries. With a curt nod, he headed for the entrance, but LaRoe's fancy girl circled the table and planted herself squarely in his path.
Say, Sheriff, you look all tuckered out.
Her husky voice was low and sympathetic.
Have a drink on the house.
Too busy to stick around, lady, Pat sniffed. Say, that's a swell brand of scent.
Maggie's lips parted in a lazy smile. Thanks for the compliment. It's odeur d'amour. I get it special from New York.
I gamble there ain't a gal around here who can get scent like that. Pat had regained his affability.
I should say not. They wouldn't pay the price.
I wouldn't think so, agreed the sheriff. It sure is different. Good day, ma'am. When he emerged from the bucket of blood, a light shone in his eyes like that of a prospector who unexpectedly hit a rich vein. Lady Luck was surely a fettle jade. With one hand she crowded a feller with a club, and with the other she handed him a prize package. End of chapter 7.